ever since the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct ended, there's been a lot of strangeness and weirdness going around, negativity towards the platform, basically due to price points, right? The $80 Mario Kart World. I almost said Mario Kart 8. It's so weird to actually finally have a new Mario Kart. I mean, exciting, but like it's been 11 years, right? So forgive me. And on top of that, obviously the price point of the Switch itself. Although I will note, it's actually more expensive in other countries here than it is in the United States, except for Japan, where it's actually a little bit cheaper. That being said, what I want to focus on here is correcting some of the misinformation that's going on out there, both about game pricing. There's actually extreme misinformation going around about game pricing and also physical games, because again, there's a lot of misinformation out there about physical games. Now, before I dive into that misinformation, I want to make sure that you guys are aware we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 down in the description or in the pinned comment. I wish all of you guys luck. That being said, I have to note here that despite the price stuff, we're seeing sellouts in places like the UK, reportedly sold out within minutes, according to Christopher Dring over on X. And then, hey, Australia is the opposite. The Nintendo Switch 2 is actually more expensive than a PlayStation 5 in Australia, and because of that, pre-orders have been up for days, and it still hasn't sold out. Now, I do anticipate it'll probably sell out eventually before launch in Australia, but obviously, price point has become a problem. So as much as you guys think pricing is bad here in the United States, it's actually much worse in other places, be it Europe or Australia or even our neighbors to the north in Canada. Pricing is just crazy all over the place for this platform. Video games are seemingly only getting more expensive across the board. This generation with PlayStation and Xbox introduced $70 games, and obviously now Nintendo Switch 2 is introducing the idea of $80 games. Not that there haven't been games that have been 80 or more, especially ones that include DLC and deluxe editions and all that, but the point is, video games are just getting more expensive, not less. Of course, everything else in my life is getting more expensive and not less, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised. My issue with this is overall, yes, I would like for things to be cheaper, but I would also like to pay less for my groceries. I would like to pay less for everything, and I understand that that's not going to probably happen anytime soon. So, setting that aside, the expensiveness of all of it, there's actually a lot of misinformation. And that includes on game pricing. There are many, many people out there that believe game pricing is actually $90 for physical copies. Don't believe me? Well, there's this.
Some Nintendo Switch 2 games will be more expensive. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, this probably means they're just going to be $70. Like, all of them across the board are going to be $70, which is more expensive. You're wrong. They're actually, in some cases, going to be $80. And not only are the digital downloads of these games going up to $80 in some cases, from what I'm reading, some of the physical copies of these games will be going to $90.
Yeah, and then that.
Nintendo Switch 2 games cost $80 digitally and $90 physically, and I have to do an angry rant because this is ridiculous.
Oh, and would you look at this?
And that's on top of new games getting a wicked next-gen tax. I didn't mention yet that Mario Kart World sets a new high mark for pricing at $80 for a digital copy, with the physical copy rumored to be even higher.
Not enough evidence? How about this?
The big, awful surprise was that some games, including Mario Kart World, are going to be priced at $80 for the digital edition or $90 if you want to buy it physical.
Yeah. Everywhere you look, well, seemingly everywhere, reports are flying that physical games are $90 and digital games are $80 right here in the United States. The problem with this is obviously that it's not true, but it's also almost understandable why it happened, although I'm kind of pointing back to a single journalist who helped spread the propaganda of misinformation. That being said, we'll dive into that because also, guys, speaking of $90 for physical, well, if you pay attention to the internet, Nintendo has killed physical games. Don't believe me? Check out this.
Now, I made a brief mention at the beginning of the video about how they're treating physical releases, and this is what I was referring to. It's about their game key card. So apparently, the game key cards are like basically giving you access to download the game via the internet. So what you actually buy, the physical copy, it's not like the game you're just getting Nintendo's stamp of approval to download the game itself. Which ties into the old Ubisoft quote of "you'll own nothing and you'll like it." That's not exactly what they said, but they basically said, I think verbatim was, gamers need to get comfortable not owning their games, or not owning anything, something to that effect. And Nintendo seems to be following suit with that philosophy. You're not actually owning anything if you're buying a physical copy of a game. You're still just getting a permission slip, literally like a library card. Not even a library card, actually. You're getting like a hall pass where you get to put your physical copy into the Switch 2 in order to download the game itself from Nintendo. You don't own shit.
Yeah. All of this over this thing called game key cards. Look, people are getting confused, and overall, the confusing part rests with Nintendo. Nintendo is the one that created this mess, and now it's left to people like me to try to clean it up, because Nintendo doesn't seem interested in handling all this misinformation and trying to put out statements or update their website or do anything to combat it. Now, technically, the information Nintendo has provided does already take care of these problems, but it requires reading comprehension, and it requires people to do their own research. And when people are reporting on things, or YouTubers are making content, a lot of times people rely on them to do the research, and they don't always do it, or they don't always interpret it correctly, or they just want to grift. Let's just be honest. Grifting is a big thing here on YouTube. It's a big thing on social media, and it's popular to hate Nintendo. Remember, Nintendo is always doomed since, 18 whatever. It's the 1800s when they came into existence. Nintendo's always doomed. They're always going out of business. They're always going to put their games third party and get out of the console business. And yet they are literally the market leader, and Switch 2 is selling out in many regions. I heard it sold out in Ireland as well. Probably is going to sell it here in the United States whenever pre-orders actually go live. That being said, we have to get into the misinformation. So why are people thinking there are $90 physical games and $80 digital games here in the US? Well, it all stems back to that article I showed earlier by Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming. And this all stems back to prices in France and other countries in Europe, where you're seeing the physical game for Mario Kart 8 is listed at 90 euros, while the digital is listed at 80 euros. This has really begun the confusion because Nintendo created that price discrepancy and also raised prices about 30 euros for physical copies, or at least physical copies of Mario Kart 8 World in Europe. So Nintendo created the price discrepancy in that territory. That doesn't mean that price discrepancy applies to anywhere else, because pricing is localized. Just like you would go to Canada and things cost different there than they cost here in the United States, things cost different in Europe than they do, say, in Japan, right? Prices are based on location and area and different economics and different reasonings behind it. But it is true that our friends out in Europe are dealing with the prospect of 90 euro games and 80 euro digital games, at least for one singular title. This led to the report by Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming. And this report, to me, as much as I really respect Tom Henderson, is full of misinformation. And the problem is that Tom Henderson is considered so reliable. I just reported on him last week, and he was 100% right with his report. He's so reliable that all people got to do is see this article, and they run the story without doing any further research, because Tom Henderson is usually so on top of his game. This time around, he's not. And the problem is the following lines in his article, where he says games are going to be physical, or some games physical are going to be $90 and digital is going to be $80. He doesn't provide any sourcing on this because that price point doesn't actually exist outside of Europe. And then later he talks about how, yes, it's 90 euros and 80 euros digital. The problem is the headline and the very first paragraph are saying that games here in the United States are $90 physical and $80 digital. That's not the case. Nintendo's own website and all the retailers have Mario Kart World listed as $79.99. Why? Because that's the MSRP from Nintendo, the manufacturer suggested retail price. Yes, that is what physical copies are. So yes, well, that is still expensive. The point is, it's not 90 or it's not 80 digital. It is 80 digital. It's also 80 physical. So there you go. That is just the way things are listed at the moment. Obviously, Nintendo may change these prices, but for right now, that is just correcting that misinformation, which I'm just tired of seeing $90 US games quoted everywhere when that's not actually what's going on. Some people try to argue, oh, the taxes, and oh, okay, then your $70 Tears of the Kingdom is $80 then, right? No one was talking about that back then. Let's stop pretending, and taxes are different per state, and some states don't even have like sales tax, so then it actually would be. So again, it varies by state. So point is, it's officially listed as $79.99 MSRP. Again, I wish it was cheaper, but it's not as expensive as people are reporting it to be. Now, that said, we have to get into the, oh my gosh, can't believe we didn't have to talk about this, physical games. Because look, a really big YouTuber, Moist Critical, said this about physical games and Nintendo.
You own absolutely nothing. You own the idea of being able to have this game on your console. It's amazing.
And that video's got like 3 million views, and there's a lot of other people running with the same headline. Nintendo's not actually getting rid of physical games. In fact, games like Cyberpunk 2077 with all of its DLC and everything, they actually publicly announced the game is fully available to play on a 64 gigabyte cartridge without any download. So day one, you can buy Cyberpunk 2077, insert the cartridge, and play. Does that sound like physical has gone away? No, it's because of this announcement, which is in a really weird spot on Nintendo's website, about Nintendo Switch 2 game key cards. Now, what is a game key card, and why is it causing so much confusion? Well, a game key card is an actual physical cartridge, but the cartridge doesn't contain the game. It instead just contains a license key to play a game. Now, that's a little weird, right? That even just sounds weird saying it out loud. But here's the thing. It's actually not that confusing if you consider the Nintendo Switch 1 and honestly other platforms as well. What is a unfortunately common thing that happened on Switch 1? A number of games would release with box art like this, and inside that box would be a digital code download and no physical cartridge. So you were just buying a basically empty case for a code to download a game and add to your library. Nintendo decided, and I would say this is actually a pro-consumer move, to say no, you can no longer release a fake physical game and have a download code. No. You must have a physical cartridge in there, but the cartridge doesn't have to contain the game. You can make people download the game like a digital game. But what Nintendo enabled with the key card is that you must insert it. You can then go download it. You have to boot the game the very first time with the internet. And then you do not need to boot the game after that with the internet, but you are required to keep the game key card in the console. Why? Well, the game key card is actually the license key. You cannot play the game without the license key. So when you're inserting it, the Switch recognizes it and lets you play the game. This is actually replacing digital codes. And the cool thing about the license being located on that thing is you can actually resell that license. Someone else can grab that game key card, put it in their Switch 2, download the game, and play so long as that cartridge is in. Now, the former person who sold the cartridge can't play the game anymore because they don't have the license key, but it actually made you able to resell digital games in a form. That is actually pretty cool and fairly pro-consumer from Nintendo. Now, some people are still probably confused even with this explanation and even with this graphic on screen. The fact that it needs so much explanation is already in that self-confusing. So let's compare it actually to something that is different but easier to understand. PlayStation and Xbox physical games. When you buy your physical games, you have to go home, insert the disc in those platforms, and wait for them to install. Sometimes that install involves downloading several gigs of information off the internet. Sometimes the install is entirely located on the disc. Now, once it's installed, that means the whole game is located internally on the hard drive of your PlayStation 5 or your Xbox Series X, right? That's the thing. It's all located internally. But you still need the disc to play. You have to put the disc in to play the game. Not because the system's actually reading anything off the disc and playing off the disc. It's because the disc still maintains the license key. That is what enables you to resell that physical copy because the license key never leaves the disc. So the entire game is installed and located on your local hard drive, just like buying a digital game and downloading it off the internet. They're very similar in that regard in that they both are located internally. And you need that physical item in the case of the Nintendo Switch 2, the game keycard in the case of PlayStation 5, the disc to actually play the game because it unlocks it on your system. That means it can be resold. So yeah, that's the easiest way I have to explain that. That is not Nintendo getting rid of physical games. That is Nintendo forcing companies that are putting codes in a box to say, no, you can't sell a fake physical game at a store that cannot be resold and handled in a similar way to an actual physical game. They're saying we can't do that. It's a bad look for our company. A better look would be if there was still a physical cartridge in there and you needed that cartridge to play the game, and you could resell it just like a physical game, and obviously it would just remain available so long as the servers are online to be able to download it. Or if you already have it downloaded on your system and you don't plan to sell at all, you can still use it. It's just, it is a fake physical because you're still downloading the game. Obviously, it's not located on the cartridge, but it's also partial physical because the license key is located on a physical cartridge, and that can be resold. It can be borrowed to friends, all that stuff. So yeah, that is the difference here. That's the big primary difference here. So I hope that makes sense. I hope all of this makes sense. There's so much misinformation running out there. And here's the thing, that misinformation is Nintendo's own fault. They didn't do a good job clarifying all of this stuff. But also it's the fault of the people reporting on it for not doing the research themselves, relying on headlines at places like Insider Gaming instead of actually digging into where the information comes from. And when they're saying games are 90 in the US and 80 digital, and they provide absolutely no source for that because there is no source for that, it just gets absolutely wild out there. And look, it's actually a problem to me because it is stoking the flames of what is legitimate criticism. It is fair to be critical of the price of Switch 2. It is fair to be critical of the price of the games, especially things like Mario Kart World, and obviously the fact they're charging not $79.99 for Switch 1 games that are upgraded. If you don't own the game and you want to buy it physically, you got to pay $79.99. That is absolutely, not all of them, some of them are $69.99, but you get the point. That's obviously, to me, way too expensive, and they shouldn't be doing that. But in the end, that criticism is absolutely fair, and that is a conversation we absolutely need to have. But in order to have that conversation, we first have to take the other things that are just stoking the flames of that and remove it, because that stuff isn't true. And the moment we realize it isn't true, we can focus on the actual issues. So, all right, folks, I am Nathaniel Reveljans from Nintendo Prime. I hope this helped, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.